May I add something? So annual plants live for a year or less. There are biennials, live for 2 years. And perennials can live anywhere from 4 or 5 years to 600 years. Our oaks live 600 years. People don't know our toyon shrub can be 450 years old in the right situation. In the right situation, we've seen toyons in the field that look like little oaks. Their trunks are so massive, and they've been in the ground. And what they like in nature, many of these plants are adapted to dry summers. And when we put them in gardens and we have the drip or the irrigation on through the summer, that's what kills them. So if you give the native plants the right conditions, you can expect a long life out of most of them.
Another one of my gardens that I have some pictures of that was on the tour this year, the garden has been through its second dry season, so I said, we should review your watering now, which should be cut way back and maybe cut off to some plants. And it turns out he had just turned the irrigation on a couple weeks ago. And I said, no. Your soil's not even dried out yet. And but it is really a major mind shift about watering needs to occur with California natives. I had another client who, for reasons, and I have some pictures of that garden too, for reasons I'll never understand, left his irrigation system on all winter long. And by April, the plants were croaking right and left, especially Salvia clevelandii. It's hard to kill a Salvia clevelandii. But sure enough, everyone that was put in croaked.
Are the plants here such that you can have the same irrigation plan for the entire yard, or do you have to isolate it?
I use the concept of hydrozoning. For example, if someone has a redwood and they want to do some understory planting around it, then I know that the plants that are going to thrive underneath that are going to need some summer moisture that they would get the fog drip, for example. If I have a shady corner, I usually try to separate out my shady areas and my sunny areas and have a different drip system for them, because some of the shade-loving plants, the soil tends to stay moist longer, so they want a little bit more water. Or let's say, as often happens, someone really loves their Japanese maple and they don't want to take it out. Or I've had this happen too, or their birches. They don't want to take out their birches. So then I really have to think really carefully about how I'm going to balance the needs of those plants, of those trees they want to keep, and the plants that are going to go underneath them. Now, because California has such a diverse microclimate, you can find plants that can tolerate summer irrigation, and those are the plants that I tend to try to use around those kinds of higher water use plants. So the answer is, if you have a full sunny yard, you could probably get away with one irrigation system. Now, I don't even know whether I have time to talk about irrigation, because that is a whole big subject in and of itself. Some people hate drip and don't believe it. Some people water by hand. And some people think it's better to use very limited overhead spray. I try to strike a balance with all of that. And they also use the grid pattern. This is that client who left the irrigation system on all winter long. So if you see some bare spaces, that's why. But this lower area was all lawn, and this upper area was all lawn. And so we moved that entirely, put in a dry creek bed. There's that verbena again. Yarrow, white yarrow here. There was some sages. This is the dead sage, and this is the other sage. And I used some golden aster in here, and some I don't think you can see it here, but I used some Galvesia, the Island Bush Snapdragon, and some California Fuchsia, and that's one of my favorite combinations. The Island Bush Snapdragon, which I don't have a picture of, is a subshrub that gets about 4 feet tall with red tubular flowers. I like to use a forefront planting of the California Fuchsia and create hummingbird heaven, because by the time the Island Bush Snapdragon is starting to wane, the California Fuchsia comes in, and so I can have an extended period of red tubular flowers for the hummingbirds. This is one example of a walkway where we used flagstone set in a coarser gravel. This is not decomposed granite, but it's a coarser gravel that also has some binding qualities into it, and so it acts as a mortar to hold it in place. And this is another view of that same garden.
How deep a bed do you need on that gravel?
Pardon?
How deep of a bed do you need for the gravel?
Usually it's about a 6 to 8 inch, because you're putting base rock underneath it before you're putting your other material. And then you have your edgers, you have your bender board, so that means you don't want that sticking up too much. And that's usually about 4 to 6 inches wide. This is a condominium in Palo Alto that was also on the Native Garden tour. There actually was no lawn here, but it was quite shady, but it was a dappled enough shade that we added a toyon. I don't think that's the toyon. I think this is the toyon right here, and a mid-sized manzanita with some ground-cover ceanothuses, and then we added coffeeberry as a foundation plant, and it's doing just beautifully. And the clients have trained their gardeners not to prune it, because it's only about 2 years old. And this is a shady area, so this has a foreground planting of the evergreen currant. So it's a really great foundation planting. And I don't have any pictures of what was happening over here, but we have a lot of different interesting stuff. The thing is, with a condominium, you really have to be mindful. You're working with multiple clients with multiple ideas and multiple tastes. And so I tried to keep something that was fairly simple. This is the Mimulus Eleanor, which is one of the hardiest monkey flowers. Monkey flowers are beautiful, but they have a rather checkered history. Has anybody ever grown a monkey flower and had it die on them?
Many times.
Many times, yes. So I tend to stick with Mimulus Eleanor, or the straight species like the sticky monkey flower or the bifidus, because they seem to be the hardiest. And this is another area here. This is the deer grass, which is a beautiful grass that you can cut or not cut. And I believe this is this might be Ceanothus centennial again, I'm not sure. But this garden will stay mostly evergreen year-round. There haven't been any big dead spots. Yes?
A question. I used weed cover in the back before planting things, and I'm just curious what you think about that, because I've got to do the front lawn now, and I have to decide what I'm going to use there. And then
plastic or paper?
I don't know. It came in rolls, and at the time I didn't really know.
It wasn't paper. It was the black stuff.
Okay.
Polyethylene.
So
I would yank it up wherever you can.
Okay.
And but I am a great fan of sheet mulching. You can, let's say that you want to get rid of your lawn and it's going to take you a while to do it. You could sheet mulch your lawn right now, and then by the fall it'll be largely decomposed and you can plant through it. Or what some people do is they do the sheet mulching and then they just dig the holes where they want the plants and put them in
Okay.
without waiting for the lawn to decompose.
Got it, thanks.
Now this is an example of what I call an implied path. Let's say that you've seen some of these fancier paths and it's beyond your budget or what you think you can do yourself. I like to use this as an organizing factor in the garden. And by implied path, I mean that I place the plants so that at their maximum growth, they're going to leave you a little irregular walkway so that you can walk around and do whatever maintenance you need to do in your garden without hopscotching. And this has worked out really well. This is still the condominium, and they had a valve box they wanted access to, but they didn't want a path that screamed path. So this is another way, and the path may shift over time, but usually what happens is that when you first do this method, you've got a big wide path because you have to allow room for the plants to spread in. But this is a low budget way to still use paths in your garden. This is a church garden that was on the Native Garden Tour last year. Once again, we used compressed, decomposed granite because next to mulch, it's the next cheapest thing to do. And this was a mixture of some natives that they wanted to, some non-natives they wanted to keep, but it was all lawn. And actually, last fall we did the front of the church, and it was all lawn as well. And I used mounds again because it just adds so much interest in a flat space. So there's a mound here and a mound here.
Can you say what church it is?
It's the First Presbyterian or First Congregational. It's one of the first. It's on Cowper Street in Palo Alto.
Thank you.
And we did the front. And the approach that I took with that is this is very exuberant. This has back here, this has a beautiful cluster of wild roses that are colonizing. And this one happened to be one from further north called the Nootka Rose. And it gets gorgeous rose hips. But this area, this was about 3 different microclimates in this space. There's a big oak tree back here. This area here was really shady. And then it transitions into full sun. So you're asking, that's why I used the concept of hydrozoning there, because I had 3 different things going on. So the roses I could use there, and they're just happy as can be. And then I used the evergreen currant as well.
How high are the mounds usually?
The mounds usually are anywhere from, I'd say, 1.5 to 3 feet, depending upon the space that you have. Now I'm going to show you a garden where the mounds were kind of long, narrow ones, but it worked over time. And this garden is also the Native Garden Tour. This is the garden that I was talking about. It's called 3 Habitats. And you can't really see it from this view, but it's a small front yard, and the mounds were almost 3 feet tall. But by the time all the plants filled in, it just created a lovely little valley for them to walk through as they go to the front door. But forming mounds is kind of an art form, and I've spent a long time getting just the shape that I wanted, because a lot of times you see people with mounds and it just looks like a big pile of dirt. But you need to shape it down to, it needs to be compacted, and it needs to be graded so that it has a smooth line with the existing